I want to bring in Rafia Abrea. He's a geophysicist with the National Weather Center, obviously being able to give us some perspective of just how huge this kind of quake is. Rafia, are you with me now?
Yes, I'm there.
Thank you for being with us, especially at this hour. We want to get an idea from you. Can you put this in perspective? 8.9 quake off the coast, northeastern coast of Japan.
Yes, actually, this earthquake is one of the largest, probably one of the largest 5 earthquake in the history of instrumental seismology. Okay, it originally started. The preliminary magnitudes were 7.9. Then about maybe 25 to half an hour later, as more information became available, it was updated to an 8.8. And then the latest update that we have gotten is actually an 8.9. So that puts it right up there. It's probably a larger earthquake than the one that we saw, the 27th earthquake in Chile, which is an 8.8.
Well, and it's my understanding that that increase of an estimation from a 7.9 to an 8.8 or an 8.9 is 10 times worse.
Roughly speaking, yes. Okay. Basically, since we're dealing with a logarithmic scale, in terms of the energy release, which is what the magnitude means, each increment of an increment of 1 in the Richter scale usually means that there has been 32 times more energy release from the previous estimate, which is 7.9 to this 8.9.
Well, we want to, if people are just tuning in, we just want to give them an idea of what they're actually looking at. They're looking at dramatic video at the Miyagi prefecture where there was a report of a 13 or 30 foot. There's a little bit of conflicting reports on that tsunami wave, and just dramatic video. When you look at that, Rafia, I'm hoping that you have access to a television where you can see this sweeping body of water that is going across homes, farms, cars. And when you look at that type of town, as our producer in Tokyo has informed us, it's one of the more populated coastal towns in Japan, the northeastern coast. Give us an idea of what that tsunami is. The worst over? Are we seeing the worst of it, or could we see a heck of a lot more hitting this town and elsewhere?
Okay, in terms of the tsunami, basically the thing about it with the tsunami is the fact that what we're looking at is a major coastal flooding invading the coastal, the low-lying coastal areas with exactly the same force that shook buildings and bring them to the ground. Okay, so a lot of people don't seem to understand. A tsunami is not an actual wave. It's basically like this huge volume of water hitting you. And, well, what you see is exactly what we can definitely expect. So in terms of the tsunami, local tsunami, yes, we probably have seen the worst of this part, at least in the area of Japan. Tsunamis are the kind of geological and oceanographic hazards that can trouble faraway areas. We saw this in Sumatra in 2004. We saw this in Chile last year. Okay, so at this particular point, the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center is in tsunami watch to see which other areas of the Pacific Basin could actually be at risk.
And we're looking at video right here, there at the Miyagi prefecture, of a wave, and as you described it, just an intense force. Are we looking at a wave that could then push on shore and continue to do more damage? Is that what we're looking at right here?
At this particular, what happens with a tsunami is that, as the water keeps encountering objects and obstacles in its way, it loses the energy, so it doesn't really goes all the way into the shore. I mean, there is a limit into what it reaches. Okay, so at this particular point, I don't really know because I cannot see the video right away.
Okay, you don't have access. I'm hoping, if it's possible to turn on the television and tune it to MSNBC, because what we're seeing is not actually the force of the water once it's hit the shore. We're looking at the actual body of water and a huge force being pushed towards shore of what I would ask to you would be another tsunami wave, which in turn would create more damage. Put into perspective for us, if it is in fact a 13-foot tsunami wave, what's next, and what are some other areas that could be at risk? We have heard that there is a tsunami warning for Guam, Indonesia, and specifically Hawaii. So let's talk about some of the other areas that we could see some possible damage here.
Yeah, the problem with the tsunami is the fact that, for example, when the people in Japan are aware aware of the tsunami hazard simply because they just felt the earthquake. Okay, as we go farther away to areas like Guam and even as Hawaii, in which people have not felt the earthquake, and so they have no notion that there is an actual hazard on their way. Okay, so this is the reason why in which we need and we have in place the Pacific Tsunami Warning and Alaska Tsunami Warning Centers to send out these alerts, particularly since the fact that it'll take several hours if there's actually a tsunami wave, several hours to reach Hawaii. So there is time, if needed, to evacuate coastal areas. Same goes for Guam and everything else, and that is exactly the reason why the tsunami watch is so important.
And obviously, people should be tuning in to their local stations wherever they're watching if they're in an area that's at risk, and rely on their local folks to give them that indication. I know after the recent quake in Chile, we saw that, and really quickly they were able to implement tsunami warnings and get people to higher ground, and move pretty fast. We're seeing some of this water come closer, and I was asking you whether or not this could be a tsunami wave, and as I watched it, I was waiting for it to come on shore. It did not. It looks like it just sort of stopped short of that. What does that tell you about any possible further or any other tsunami wave that could strike?
Well, my area of expertise is actually earthquake. The people at the Tsunami Warning Center can definitely tell you.
Let me ask you about the quake then. If it's an 8.9 quake, it's my understanding that this struck underwater. Is that your understanding as well?
That is correct, yes. And that is the reason why we're seeing a tsunami.
Okay, and put into perspective for us how that it was shallow, so why we're seeing some of the damage that we're seeing as a result of where it struck and how deep it was.
Well, technically speaking, we have an earthquake that is 24 kilometers in depth. Okay, so that's 24 kilometers below the ocean floor. However, this type of the energy release and basically the amount of the earth, the amount of the size of the chunk of the earth crust that actually move, it's enough to generate vibrations and ground shaking that is likely to be felt miles and miles away. I understand that Sendai is about 80 miles away from the actual epicenter of the earthquake. So, when you have an earthquake 8.9 in magnitude or any earthquake above an 8, 80 miles away, it's not really that much of a distance. In geological terms, it's still fairly close. And that's an area that is going to be receiving the brunt of the energy in forms of ground shaking.
We're seeing some wild video from all across Japan of fires that have broken out, cars underwater, smoke billowing from office buildings in Tokyo. Rafael, I want to get some perspective for you, because I know from other earthquakes, especially the one in New Zealand, one of the things that really hampered rescue efforts was aftershocks. And we already know 30 minutes after the initial quake that a magnitude 7.4 quake struck. That was 30 minutes later. What kind of risk are we seeing of that now?
Whenever we see an earthquake of this magnitude and and in the upper crust, basically, which is what's happening, this is exactly the type of behavior we're going to expect from the Earth's crust. We're going to have aftershocks. We are going to see large aftershocks associated with this event. And of course, unfortunately, that is the type of thing that actually, number one, creates more damage to an area that's already being affected by the 8.9, but also, it creates more damage. It generates up other hazards like, fires and gas leaks and flooding for broken pipes. So yeah, in terms of response and mitigation, it's a really difficult and really hard scenario to deal with.